Why did the emergency room fall silent when she arrived? No one could explain it later, but something about her presence stilled the air, as if every heartbeat in the room paused for just a second. The automatic doors burst open, paramedics rushing through with a stretcher that carried a woman in her early 30s. Blood streaked across her face, dark hair tangled against torn fabric. Under the white glare of the ER lights, she looked both fragile and unbreakable, like a soldier carved out of exhaustion. Dr. Marcus Thompson, former Navy SEAL medic, looked up from his clipboard. 12 years of field medicine had trained him to recognize chaos instantly. But this wasn't the chaos of explosions or gunfire. This was quiet urgency, the kind that came before something important revealed itself. "What do we have?" he asked, stepping forward, voice steady as he met the rolling stretcher. "Single vehicle accident," one paramedic reported breathlessly. "Highway 49. Car hit a tree, heavy impact. Driver conscious during transport but fatting in and out. No ID found." Marcus's eyes flicked over her vitals as they transferred her to the trauma bay. Pulse weak but holding. Breathing shallow, rhythm irregular. But her posture, even while unconscious, there was a discipline in it. Her arms rested with unconscious alignment, her fingers curled like someone who'd learned control through pain. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment their eyes met, dark, alert, evaluating. She was half-conscious, yet somehow aware. Not the blank fear of most crash victims. It was the look of someone measuring her surroundings, counting exits even as blood dripped from her temple. Marcus recognized that gaze. He had seen it in the desert, in gunfire, in teammates who refused to panic while bleeding out. He glanced at the nurses. "Let's get her on monitors. IV, oxygen, stat. Prepare for shoulder examination, possible dislocation." Machines beeped to life around her. The small room filled with antiseptic air and the rhythmic tone of life measured in pulses. Marcus moved with the efficiency of muscle memory, gloves snapping, breath calm, mind already mapping her injuries. She had bruising across the ribcage, a clear dislocation at the shoulder joint, and the telltale marks of a concussion. Painful, yes, but survivable. "I need to check your shoulder," he said, voice steady but quiet. Her lips parted but no sound came. She just nodded once, a subtle flicker of discipline that told him everything he needed to know. As his hands found the injured joint, he felt her tense. But it wasn't fear. It was preparation, a reflex honed through experience. He stopped. "You've done this before," he murmured. No response, but he saw the truth in her eyes. When he adjusted her arm and pushed the shoulder gently back into alignment, her body jerked, breath sharp, yet not a sound escaped her. No scream, no cry, just steady breathing through clenched teeth, measured and exact. The kind of control that came from either long suffering or long training. When the joint clicked back into place, he looked up again, almost expecting her to pass out from the pain. Instead, she met his gaze fully for the first time. "Better," she whispered hoarsely. "Thank you." 2 words, calm and deliberate. Marcus nodded, masking the flicker of surprise that ran through him. He'd treated soldiers who had cried harder over sprains. She endured a shoulder reduction without a sound. As he finished stabilizing her arm, his eyes caught faint scars running along her hands, small, deliberate lines that spoke of years in the field. Some were from blades, others from rope. 1 or 2 looked like shrapnel burns, not the kind of marks that came from ordinary life. He made a note in her chart, but his mind was already elsewhere. When the nurses left, Marcus stood beside the bed a moment longer. "You're safe now," he said. "You're in good hands." Her gaze softened, not trust exactly, but recognition. "I know," she murmured. Then her eyes closed again. 3 days passed before she spoke more than a few words. The hospital called her Jane Doe. She hadn't given her name, hadn't requested a visitor, And somehow, in the quiet way hospitals spread rumors, everyone learned that Dr. Thompson checked her room more than any other patient. He told himself it was professional curiosity, but that wasn't entirely true. He'd seen countless trauma cases, soldiers, civilians, operators, and yet something about her lingered. The way she slept lightly, never turning her back to the door. The way she positioned her water glass and call button within reach, creating what he recognized as a tactical zone of control. And her recovery, impossibly fast. He found her one morning sitting upright, rolling her injured shoulder in precise, deliberate movements. Physical therapy patterns, controlled angles, not random motion training drills. When she noticed him watching, she froze, posture softening, pretending to be just another patient trying to get comfortable. He pulled up a chair, leaning forward. "Those movements," he said casually, "they look familiar." "Just keeping the joint from freezing," she said. Calm, measured. But her phrasing wasn't casual. It was textbook, precise, the kind of explanation only someone with medical training might use. He smiled faintly. "You seem to know exactly what you're doing." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. A flicker, the smallest spark of amusement, maybe even challenge. "I pick things up," she said. "Life teaches you to adapt." Marcus went still. The phrase wasn't random, it was a soldier's code buried beneath civilian words. Adapt, overcome, survive. That night he found himself unable to focus on his rounds. His thoughts kept circling back to her, the precision, the control, the scars. She wasn't a civilian, he knew that now. On the fourth night, Marcus returned late. The hospital was quiet, only the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beep of monitors. He found her awake, staring out the window into the parking lot's harsh sodium glow. "You're watching for something," he said softly. "Someone," she corrected without turning. The room felt colder. Marcus hesitated, then closed the door behind him. "Who?" She finally looked at him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes sharp, scanning, haunted. "The people who tried to kill me," she said. Marcus felt his pulse slow. That wasn't an accident on Highway 49. She shook her head. "No." A long silence stretched between them. Finally she sighed. "You've earned the truth." She extended her right hand, trembling slightly from the strain of movement. "Lieutenant Sarah Chen, U.S. Army Special Operations, field surgeon." Marcus's breath caught. The puzzle pieces slid into place like a key turning in a lock. The scars, the discipline, the quiet control, all of it suddenly made perfect sense. He met her gaze, steady and professional, but his voice softened. "I served too, Navy, SEAL medic, 12 years. For the first time, something shifted in her face, trust, fragile but real. "That explains why you reset my shoulder like that," she said quietly. "Field precision, no hesitation." He nodded. "And you endured it like someone who's been through worse." Her eyes darkened, old memories flickering behind them. "Worse doesn't even begin to cover it." She turned her gaze back to the window. "I wasn't supposed to survive that ambush." He said nothing, letting the silence draw the rest out naturally. She took a slow breath, her voice low and steady, the tone of someone who told this story to herself 1,000 times but never aloud. "We were deep in Afghanistan, a joint task operation. The mission was simple: extract a local asset with intel on terror financing networks. We walked into a trap. Half my team was dead in 5 minutes. The rest barely made it out. And when the dust settled, command blamed me." Her jaw tightened. "They said I failed to assess the medical risk of the asset before extraction. They said my mistake cost lives." Marcus clenched his fists. "That's not something a field surgeon forgets to do." She gave a humorless laugh. "No, it is, but someone needed a scapegoat. Someone needed me to disappear." "What do you mean?" Her eyes turned toward him, weary, fierce. "I started asking questions. noticed patterns that didn't fit, intel that went sideways too often, ops that made no tactical sense. I started suspecting someone in command was leaking data, selling intelligence. Marcus felt the chill run down his spine. "They framed you," he whispered. "They did worse," she said. "They declared me dead." He stared at her. "I faked it," she admitted. "Staged my death during a night exercise 6 months later. It was the only way to stay alive long enough to prove what I'd found." "And you've been running since." "Investigating," she corrected, "gathering proof." She reached into a small personal bag beside the bed and held up a USB drive, plain, silver, nothing remarkable. But the weight in her hand made it feel heavier than any weapon. Financial records, shell companies, transfers to terrorist-linked accounts, enough to bury the people behind it if I live long enough to hand it over. Marcus exhaled slowly, his instincts roaring awake. Every word she said was credible, the kind of betrayal only insiders could orchestrate. "Who else knows?" he asked. "No one, just me." Her gaze met his unwavering. "And now you." The air between them thickened with unspoken consequence. By knowing, he was already complicit, already marked. "Then we make sure you live long enough," he said finally. She studied him, eyes narrowing. "That's a dangerous promise." "I've made worse," Marcus said. Outside the window, a car idled briefly before pulling away. Sarah's eyes flicked toward it, instinctively tracking. "They'll try again," she said softly. "They always finish the job." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that carried the authority of a soldier who'd made up his mind. "Then we move first." Sarah turned toward him fully. The faintest glimmer of the soldier she once was returning to her posture, her expression, her voice. "Then let's make it count." And for the first time in years, Marcus Thompson felt that pulse of purpose, that quiet, unspoken bond between warriors who refused to let darkness win. He didn't know what would come next, but as he looked at her, injured, hunted, yet still burning with quiet defiance, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a patient anymore. It was the beginning of a mission. What would you risk for someone you barely knew? Marcus asked himself that question over and over as he walked down the dim hospital hallway. The night shift lights had been lowered to save power, and the corridor's stillness pressed on him like a memory from the field, that same silence before an ambush. Machines beeped faintly behind closed doors. The air smelled of antiseptic and secrets. He stopped outside her room. The nameplate still read Jane Doe, though he now knew the truth. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Army Special Operations. Officially dead, technically alive, and one wrong move away from becoming neither. He pushed the door open quietly. Sarah sat upright in the faint glow of the bedside lamp, eyes sharp, body still. The bruises had begun to fade, but the tension hadn't. She looked like someone who'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. "You didn't sleep," he said softly. "I don't," she replied, "not when they're close." He moved closer, leaning against the counter. "You're sure they'll come here?" She nodded once. Hospitals are routine places to finish the job. Quiet, predictable. No one asks too many questions when a critical patient suddenly codes. Marcus didn't need convincing. He'd seen it before, agents silenced through medical complications, records scrubbed clean. It always came down to one thing: timing. "How long do we have?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, "but if I were them, I'd move tonight." The clock on the wall ticked softly, 12:17 a.m. Marcus exhaled through his nose, the decision forming before he even realized it. "Then we don't wait for them." Sarah looked at him, assessing, the faintest hint of surprise behind her composure. "You're volunteering to get dragged into this mess." He smiled without humor. "You didn't drag me, I walked in." For a long moment, neither spoke. The unspoken truth filled the silence, Helping her meant crossing a line he could never return from. Finally, she asked, "Why?" Marcus stared at the monitor beside her bed. The heart rate displayed there, steady, strong, mirrored his own. "Because when I was out there," he said, "we had a rule. You don't abandon someone who's still fighting." Sarah's eyes softened barely. "Then we'll need a plan." The plan came together in the whispered urgency of that quiet room. Marcus spoke low, packing slowly as his mind returned to the habits that once ruled every breath of his life. Contingency, timing, deception, escape. "I've got contacts," he said. "Former SEALs now running private security. They can help, but we need to get you off hospital grounds without alerting whoever's watching." Sarah's brows furrowed. "That's not easy. Hospitals log every patient transfer. If someone's monitoring, they'll know the moment I'm moved." "I'm not talking about an authorized transfer," he replied. "We'll fake an emergency." She raised an eyebrow. "Fake?" Marcus nodded. "A severe allergic reaction, dramatic symptoms, controlled risk. I inject a mild histamine compound enough to trigger visible distress. You go into simulated shock. I call for an emergency transport to a specialist facility. My team intercepts the ambulance before the handoff. By the time anyone figures it out, we'll be gone." Sarah studied him for a moment, then asked the one question that mattered. "You've done this before?" He met her gaze evenly. "Variations of it, different continents, different stakes." The corner of her mouth twitched, a soldier's half-smile, born not of amusement but recognition. "Then we're in good hands," she said quietly. "But we'll need precision. I can't afford for this to fail." "It won't," he said, though a small voice inside him whispered that every plan only survived until contact with reality. Marcus spent the next 3 hours preparing. He accessed the hospital supply cabinet under his authorized credentials, gathering the materials he'd need: a measured histamine dose, a saline flush, preloaded antihistamine syringes for reversal. He wrote out the necessary documentation for a rapid transfer order, official-looking enough to pass brief inspection. By 2:40 a.m., the pieces were in place. He sent one encrypted text to a number he hadn't used in years. "Need ghost evac, non-standard asset 300 North Lot, quiet." "Them." The reply came 60 seconds later. "Acknowledged, 2 men, 1 vehicle. Your burning favors, brother." He typed back, "Worth it." At 2:47 a.m., he re-entered her room. Sarah was already sitting up, her expression calm, composed, but her pulse visible at her throat, steady, deliberate. She had changed into civilian clothes, the same ones she'd worn in the crash, now washed and folded by hospital staff. The faint scars on her forearms caught the fluorescent light like old stories refusing to fade. Marcus held up the syringe. "Once this starts, there's no turning back." Her gaze didn't waver. "I'm already past turning back." He nodded once, then injected the solution into her arm. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then her skin flushed red, her breathing grew ragged, and the first welts appeared across her neck and collarbone. Her performance was flawless, gasping, trembling, eyes wide with convincing panic. To anyone else, it would look fatal. Marcus hit the alarm. "Code blue, room 314, allergic reaction. I need help now." The response was immediate. Nurses flooded in, followed by the attending physician on duty. Chaos filled the small room, voices overlapping, equipment beeping, orders shouted and obeyed. "She's going into anaphylaxis," Marcus said urgently. "We're losing her airway. We need to transfer to regional medical. They've got the allergy unit." The attending nodded, already trusting Marcus's calm authority. "Do it. You take lead. Notify transport." 10 minutes later, Sarah was loaded onto a stretcher, oxygen mask secured, IV lines attached. Her breathing had stabilized just enough to look plausible. Marcus rode beside her as the ambulance doors closed. Through the front windshield, the driver turned slightly, and Marcus caught sight of a familiar profile under the EMT cap. Jake Morrison, former SEAL, his oldest friend. "Good to see you again, Doc," Jake muttered as the engine roared to life. "You pick strange hours for reunions." Marcus allowed himself a thin smile. "We're being watched. 2 black SUVs, likely unmarked, keep us moving. No sirens until we're clear." Sarah's eyes flicked open under the oxygen mask. "You trust him," she whispered. "With my life," Marcus said simply. The ambulance rolled into the dark streets, lights flashing but silent, a phantom slipping through the veins of the city. For a while, the only sounds were the hum of tires and the steady beeping of the onboard monitors. Marcus sat beside Sarah, one hand resting on the gurney rail, eyes alternating between her vitals and the mirrors. He could see it in her, the constant awareness, the unspoken calculation behind every glance. She was still fighting, even here. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a faint nod. "Feels strange, pretending to die when you've already done it once." He didn't know how to respond to that. Some truths didn't need replies. 20 minutes passed before Jake's voice came through the intercom, tight and low. "We've got company. 2 black SUVs trailing us. No lights, keeping distance. Picked us up 5 miles back." Marcus's gut clenched. "They're here faster than expected." "Must have been watching the hospital feeds," Sarah said quietly. "They knew the moment I left." "How far to the safe house?" Marcus asked. 20 miles north," Jake answered. "We won't make it if they press us." The hum of the tires deepened. Marcus leaned closer to Sarah. "Options." "Truck stop," she said immediately. 3 miles ahead. Multiple exits, civilian cover, high visibility. They won't risk a public grab." He nodded, appreciating the tactical speed of her thinking. She was still a soldier, even half-drugged and bruised. Jake adjusted their route without hesitation. The black SUVs followed. As the truck stop appeared, a patch of fluorescent light and concrete in the middle of darkness, Marcus checked the pistol hidden beneath his jacket. His civilian badge would mean nothing now. This wasn't about legality. It was survival. They pulled in near the main building. The night air was sharp, filled with diesel fumes and the distant hum of highway traffic. "Stay close," Marcus said, helping Sarah down from the gurney. She moved slower than she wanted to, favoring her shoulder, but her eyes never stopped scanning. 2 SUVs idled near the far exit, headlights off, men inside, silhouettes shifting. Jake positioned himself between them and the main doors, hand near his concealed weapon. 6 hostiles, he said quietly. Military posture, probably former contractors. "Not amateurs," Marcus muttered. They moved toward the bright glass doors of the truck stop. Inside, warmth, fluorescent light, the illusion of safety. Coffee machines hummed. Truckers shuffled by, unaware that a small war was following 2 steps behind them. Sarah's hand brushed Marcus's arm, a silent signal. 2 near the exit," she whispered. "Another by the front door." He followed her gaze. She was right. Their pursuers were moving in with quiet precision, spreading out to cut off escape routes. Then one of them spoke, "Dr. Thompson." Marcus froze. Hearing his full name from a stranger's mouth hit harder than a gunshot. The man's voice was calm, professional, the tone of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. "Let's talk," he said. "No one needs to get hurt." Marcus positioned himself slightly ahead of Sarah, instinctively shielding her. "About what?" "About Ms. Chen," the man said, "and the misunderstanding that's put everyone in this unfortunate situation." Sarah straightened. Her voice was quiet, razor-sharp. "It's not a misunderstanding," she said. "It's treason." The man smiled, a faint, practiced smile. "That's a complicated word, Lieutenant. The people you're accusing aren't traitors. They're patriots. You're just seeing a small piece of a much bigger picture." "Selling weapons to terrorists is not patriotism," she replied. Marcus's eyes flicked around the room. The other men were closing in, one near the restrooms, another near the vending machines. Civilians were thinning out. The window of safety was shrinking by the second. The man's tone softened, almost sympathetic. "You were a good soldier, Sarah, skilled, resilient. You don't have to throw that away. Hand over the evidence. Let us debrief you. You'll understand the greater purpose once you see the full scope." She tilted her head. "And if I refuse?" His eyes hardened. "Then we take this conversation somewhere quieter." The words hit like cold steel. Marcus looked at Jake, who had already shifted his stance slightly, drawing his jacket aside just enough to reveal the pistol at his side. "Sarah," Marcus said under his breath, "when I move." But she didn't wait for him to finish. In one sharp motion, she reached into her pocket, pulled out the USB drive, and held it high for everyone to see. "You want this," she called out. "Come take it." Then she threw it, hard, sending it skittering across the tile floor beneath the vending machines. Instinct took over. Several of the men turned, breaking formation. "Now," Marcus shouted. Jake drew his weapon, firing a single controlled shot into the ceiling. Chaos erupted. Civilians screamed. People hit the ground. Coffee cups shattered. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward the kitchen exit. She moved like a soldier again, every step calculated, every breath deliberate. Behind them, the sound of shouts and breaking glass filled the air. As they burst through the back door into the cold night, headlights cut across the parking lot, two approaching vehicles, engines low, lights off. Reinforcements. Jake's voice came through the comm unit clipped to his collar. "Backup's here." Sarah didn't slow. "Then we fight to live." Marcus followed, pulse pounding, knowing that this wasn't just escape anymore. It was exposure. Every step forward meant they were closer to either freedom or the point of no return. The night swallowed them whole. 3 soldiers, 2 enemies, one impossible truth chasing them all. How far could 3 people run before the past caught up to them? Marcus didn't know. He only knew the sound of tires screaming against asphalt as Jake floored the accelerator, their escape vehicle fishtailing onto a backroad that vanished into the dark countryside. Behind them, distant lights flashed, headlights sweeping like searching eyes. The smell of gunpowder still clung to Marcus's clothes. His ears rang from the single shot Jake had fired at the truck stop ceiling, a warning that had bought them seconds, maybe less. Sarah sat beside him in the backseat, one hand gripping the door handle, the other pressed against her ribs. Her breathing was steady but shallow. Her shoulders still ached from both the crash and the staged allergic attack, but her eyes, sharp and unflinching, hadn't softened once. Jake's voice broke the silence. "We've got 2 SUVs behind us, maybe 3 clicks back. They'll regroup before chasing hard." Marcus leaned forward. "We'll never make the safe house if they're tracking GPS." "They're not," Jake said, a grin ghosting across his jawline. "We ditched the transponder 5 miles ago, but they've got eyes, drones, maybe thermal." Sarah looked out the window, her reflection a faint ghost against the glass. "Then we disappear." Marcus caught her tone, not fear but command. The voice of someone who'd led before, who'd been forced to improvise when orders failed. "How?" he asked. "There's a service road that cuts through the ridgeline ahead," she said, recalling the map she'd studied before the accident. "Steep, dirt, unmarked, but if we take it we lose the pavement trail. No heat from brakes, no tire shine." Jake didn't question it. He just turned the wheel hard, sparks flying as they veered onto a narrow gravel path hidden between rows of pine. The SUV jolted violently as rocks cracked beneath the tires. The headlights cut swaths through the darkness, illuminating nothing but dust and trees. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Then quietly, Sarah said, "You didn't have to come with me." Marcus turned his head. "You think I could have stayed behind after what I heard?" She gave a faint, humorless smile. "You don't even know if what I said is true." I know a lie when I hear one, he said simply. And yours was. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes flicked toward him with something close to gratitude. Jake spoke without turning around. Doc doesn't gamble unless he believes in the odds, and he just bet his whole career on you. Marcus shot him a look, not helping. Sarah's faint smile returned, more genuine this time. Maybe he's right. They drove in silence for another mile before Jake slowed and cut the lights. The SUV rolled to a stop beneath an overhang of trees, hidden from aerial view. Jake turned off the engine. The hum of the world faded, crickets, distant wind, nothing else. They had escaped for now. Marcus checked his watch, 2 hours until sunrise. Sarah leaned back, closing her eyes briefly, exhaustion flickering through her composure. That gives us time to think. Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on her. He saw it now, the thin cracks behind her stoicism, the tremor in her fingers, the faint tremble in her jaw when she thought no one was looking. You need rest, he said. She shook her head. Rest is what gets people killed. You're not in the field anymore, he said quietly. Her eyes opened sharp again. Aren't I? The question hung in the dark. He had no answer. They reached the safe house just after dawn. It was an old cabin tucked into a wooded ridge, half hidden by overgrown pines. From the outside, it looked abandoned, chipped paint, rusted gutters, broken window frames. But inside, it was fortified with steel shutters, reinforced walls, and emergency supplies stacked neatly against the far wall. Jake disarmed the entrance trap and gestured them in. Home, sweet home. Sarah stepped across the threshold first, scanning every corner with practiced precision. The posture, the measured breathing, it was instinct. Once a soldier, always one. Marcus followed, closing the door behind them. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the gaps, painting streaks of gold across her face. Who else knows this place exists? She asked. 4 people, Jake said. All ghosts, none talk. That's 3 too many, Sarah muttered, then caught herself. Sorry, habit. Jake chuckled. Good habit means you're alive. They set up quietly. Marcus sterilized a small table and began rebandaging her shoulder while Jake checked the perimeter feeds. You'll be fine, Marcus said, his voice low and clinical but his hands gentle. You've got better muscle response than most rookies. She glanced at him. You call all your patients rookies. Only the ones who can field dress their own wounds. Her lips curved into something close to amusement. You've got a good bedside manner for someone planning a fake anaphylactic attack. He met her eyes. It worked. Barely, she said, her tone lighter but her expression thoughtful. You ever think about what happens if this fails, if they find us? All the time, Marcus said. But thinking about failure doesn't stop it. Preparation does. Sarah's eyes softened. You talk like someone who misses the fight. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He tied the final knot on her sling and leaned back. Sometimes I do. Not the chaos, just the clarity. In the field, you know who you are. In hospitals, everything's gray. She studied him for a long moment, and now. He looked at her, really looked, the scars, the discipline, the defiance wrapped in fatigue. Now I know exactly who I am again. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. Jake monitored the perimeter cameras while Marcus reviewed maps and contingency routes. Sarah sat at the window, staring into the tree line, her mind miles away. Finally, Marcus spoke. You said earlier you faked your death after a mission went wrong. What really happened? She didn't move for a long time. Then she turned, her voice distant but steady. I was stationed in Kabul. Our unit was sent to extract an asset with intel on illicit weapons transfers. Everything about the op felt wrong from the start, the coordinates, the calm silence, the lack of air support. When we got there, it wasn't an extraction. It was a setup. Her hands clenched around the chair's armrests. They were waiting for us. Snipers, IEDs, comms jammers, the whole thing. We fought for an hour, lost 6 people before we could fall back. She swallowed hard. Command blamed me, said I'd broken protocol. They forged the after-action reports, erased evidence. I was finished. Conveniently, the person in charge of intel oversight was a colonel I'd questioned a month before. Marcus recognized the pattern, corruption protected by hierarchy. "So you went underground," he said. She nodded. "I used a training exercise to vanish. A fake drowning. They never found a body. I've been collecting proof ever since, documents, logs, recordings. I was close to breaking through when they found me." "On the highway," Marcus murmured. "Yeah," her voice lowered. "They forced me off the road. I got lucky. That tree, it stopped me before they could." She turned back toward the window. "But they won't stop, I know too much." Marcus's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "Then we make sure they can't erase you again." Sarah looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "You keep saying we." He smiled faintly. "I left the SEALs because I was tired of politics, not because I stopped believing in loyalty. You're one of us. That still means something." Something flickered behind her expression, surprise, maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper. "Most people run when they hear my story," she said softly. "I'm not most people." She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded once, small, decisive. "Then you should know the worst of it." He leaned forward. "Go on." She hesitated. When she spoke, her voice trembled just enough to remind him that beneath all the strength, there was still a wound that hadn't healed. "I was captured," she said. 18 months before they declared me dead. A joint raid gone wrong. I spent almost 2 years in a compound outside Jalalabad. They wanted intel, codes, operations, personnel lists. I gave them nothing. Marcus froze. "You survived 18 months of captivity." "Survived," she said bitterly. "I existed, that's different." He saw the shadows in her eyes, the kind only prisoners carried. "How did you get out?" "A drone strike," she said quietly. "We were never meant to survive it, but somehow I did. When I crawled out of the rubble, the world thought I was dead, so I stayed that way." She exhaled, eyes distant. "You asked me earlier why I don't sleep. That's why." Marcus sat back, throat tight. There were no words strong enough to answer that. But he found one anyway. "You didn't just survive," he said. "You came back to fight." She looked at him, tired, defiant. "What else is there to do?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of recognition. Two soldiers who'd seen too much, both carrying ghosts they could never fully bury. Finally, Jake called from the next room. "We've got movement on the perimeter." Marcus and Sarah were on their feet instantly. The monitors showed faint heat signatures moving through the tree line, slow, deliberate. "Drones?" Marcus asked. "No," Jake said grimly. "People, 3 of them, maybe more." Sarah's eyes sharpened, her fatigue gone in an instant. "They found us." Marcus grabbed his pack, double-checked his pistol. "Then we move now." Jake frowned. "We can't outrun them in daylight." Sarah stepped toward the door, every motion precise, purposeful. "Then we don't outrun them," she said. "We outthink them." Marcus followed, knowing that whatever came next, there was no turning back. He glanced at her, this woman who had been hunted, betrayed, broken, and yet refused to stop fighting. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus Thompson felt something he hadn't felt since the war: faith. Not in systems, or commands, or governments. In people. In her. What happens when the hunted decide to stop running? The question echoed in Marcus's head as the monitor's infrared display pulsed red with movement. 3, maybe 4 hostiles closing in through the tree line, slow, coordinated, deliberate. Jake leaned closer to the screen, whispering, "Patterns disciplined, not scouts. This is a full sweep." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "They're checking for escape routes. That means more are coming from the other side." Her calm unnerved him. Not because it was cold, but because it was practiced. She had been here before. She knew the rhythm of fear and how to quiet it into focus. Marcus checked his pistol and spare mags, his hands steady despite the thrum of adrenaline. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they breach. Sarah crossed the room and pulled a rolled blueprint from a cabinet she'd opened earlier. Jake raised an eyebrow. You knew this place had blueprints. Old habits, she said simply. I scanned the room when we got here. She spread it across the table, the cabin layout detailed in fading ink. They'll come from two sides, south slope and the ridge behind the generator shack. The windows on the east wall are blind angles. That's our escape path if this goes wrong. Marcus nodded, tracing the line with his finger. You take east with Jake, I'll cover south. She cut him off. No, I'm staying at the front. You and Jake take the flank. If they get inside, I'll bottleneck them at the entry point. He frowned. You're still recovering. Her eyes met his, unflinching. I've fought half-conscious before. I can hold a doorway. Something in her tone silenced his protest. It wasn't arrogance, it was conviction. Jake, she said, you've got the long gun. Jake nodded. AR in the truck, 2 mags, no suppressor. Good, you'll take high ground near the ridge. Watch for heat signatures on approach. Marcus stays here. You're our medic if this turns ugly. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She wasn't giving orders out of pride. She was falling back into the only language she trusted: command and coordination. Jake grabbed his rifle and slipped out through the side door, moving like a ghost among the trees. The silence that followed was heavier than the forest outside. Marcus turned to Sarah. You've done this before. She gave a faint, humorless laugh. Too many times. The difference is, she glanced toward the window, where pale morning light barely touched the horizon. I usually knew who I was fighting for. He didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that mattered. You're not alone this time. Her eyes softened just for a heartbeat. That's the part that scares me. They took positions. Marcus crouched behind an overturned table, his pistol angled toward the main entry. Sarah knelt near the window, setting up her line of sight with surgical precision. The air was thick with stillness. Even the birds had gone quiet. Then faintly, the crunch of boots on gravel. Marcus's breath slowed, 2 at the door. Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes locked on the faint silhouette moving past the glass, a shadow of a man, deliberate, slow, weapon-ready. She raised her hand, 3 fingers up, 3 hostiles confirmed. Marcus nodded silently. The first window cracked inward, the sound small but sharp. A gloved hand reached through the frame, then froze. Sarah fired once, a muffled thud, the hand dropped lifelessly. Contact, she whispered. The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, rounds slamming into the cabin walls, splintering wood. Marcus ducked instinctively, covering the exposed corner while Sarah returned fire with steady, precise bursts. Jake's voice crackled through the comm unit. 2 down on the ridge, 4 still moving. They've got thermal, they're scanning for you. Sarah's tone remained calm, controlled. Draw them to you. Make them think you're alone. Copy that, Jake said. Marcus looked at her between volleys. You sure about this? Yes, she said. They're expecting me to run. They need to believe I'm pinned. Another burst of gunfire. Dust filled the room. The air reeked of gun oil and burnt wood. Marcus risked a glance through the shattered frame. He saw movement, a figure crouching low, another covering him. Military formation. This wasn't random pursuit. These were trained operators. Who are they? Marcus asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. Private contractors, ex-military, Brennan's people. Brennan. Colonel Richard Brennan, former Special Operations Command, the man who buried me. Marcus's stomach turned cold. He's behind this. He runs the weapons network I exposed, she said flatly. He's been laundering funds through defense contracts for years. I was one of the few who noticed. When I tried to report him, he erased me." Marcus understood now the scale, the stakes, the quiet war beneath their lives. "Jake," Sarah said, her voice sharp again, "move to the secondary ridge. They'll flank you in 30 seconds." "Already there," Jake's voice came back, calm under pressure. Another shot rang out clean, distant. "One hostile down," Jake added. Sarah shifted positions, reloading with clinical precision. 3 left. Marcus covered her flank, firing twice at the approaching shadows. The first shot missed. The second didn't. Silence again. For a moment the world held its breath. Then a new sound, slow footsteps crunching over broken glass. Sarah stiffened. Someone's coming in. Marcus raised his weapon, breath steady, ready to fire, but Sarah held up a hand. "Wait." The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. Then a voice, male, calm, too familiar. "Lieutenant Chen," it said, "always the survivor." Marcus froze. Sarah's face turned to stone. "Brennan." Her voice was flat, but her knuckles whitened against the pistol grip. "Put the gun down," Brennan said from outside. "You've caused enough damage already." "You tried to kill me," she replied, "twice." "Correction," Brennan said smoothly. "I tried to clean up a liability. You were digging into matters beyond your clearance." Marcus clenched his jaw. He'd heard that tone before, the voice of a superior who believed the rules didn't apply to him. Sarah's next words were low, steady, dangerous. "You murdered my team to cover your crimes." Brennan sighed theatrically. "You still don't understand. Those men were casualties in a necessary operation. The world isn't black and white, Sarah. You of all people should know that." She glanced at Marcus. He saw in her eyes that something inside her had snapped, not out of rage but clarity. "Marcus," she whispered, "when I move, cover me." Before he could object, she shifted, rolling low across the floor. A flash of motion. Gunfire erupted again, short, controlled bursts. Brennan's men returned fire, but Sarah was already at the side window, taking position with lethal grace. A sharp scream from outside, one more down. 2 left, Jake shouted over comms. Sarah's breathing was steady now, focused. "Brennan," she called out, her voice cutting through the smoke, "you can still walk away." "I think not," came the reply. "You're far too valuable alive." Marcus frowned. "Alive?" Brennan's voice hardened. "You've been a ghost for 2 years, Lieutenant. Imagine what that skill set could do in the right hands. We could use you, train others to vanish just like you did. Work for us and you live. Defy us and we bury you for real this time." Marcus's stomach twisted. "He wants to recruit you." Sarah's jaw clenched. "He wants to own me." Outside, the crunch of gravel shifted. Marcus saw shadows moving along the tree line, more reinforcements arriving. Jake's voice came over comms again. "More incoming. 2 SUVs, I'm pulling back." "Negative," Sarah snapped. "Hold position, we're not done." Marcus looked at her in disbelief. "We can't win a siege." She didn't look at him. "We don't have to, we just have to make it loud enough that someone notices." He caught her meaning instantly. If they couldn't escape, they'd draw enough attention to force a response, cops, locals, anyone. Brennan's people couldn't afford a public firefight. "Jake," Marcus said quickly, "you still have the smoke grenades." 2, Jake replied. "Throw them toward the south tree line. Make it look like we're calling in reinforcements." "Copy." Moments later, the first grenade detonated, thick plumes of gray flooding the woods. Through the haze, red and blue flashes blinked, Jake's decoy lights mimicking emergency response strobes. Brennan hesitated. Marcus could almost feel the shift in control, the uncertainty in the men outside. Sarah's voice rang out. "You hear that, Colonel? Those aren't your people. That's the world catching up." For a long moment there was silence. Then Brennan's voice, cold and furious. You just signed your own death warrant. Marcus looked at her. He's retreating. She shook her head. No, he's regrouping. This isn't over. Through the smoke, they could see shapes moving back toward the SUVs. Engines roared. Gravel spat. Within minutes, the sound faded into distance. Jake returned through the back door, face streaked with sweat and dirt. They're gone for now. Sarah lowered her weapon slowly. The tension in her shoulders eased, but only slightly. We need to move before they circle back. Marcus nodded, agreed, but where? She hesitated, then said quietly, I have a contact, someone who can make this evidence count, but he's federal. We'll need to reach D.C. Jake whistled. That's a long drive with an army on your tail. Sarah gave him a grim smile. Then we better not stop. As they packed the last of their gear, Marcus caught her looking at the sunrise through the cracked window, light spilling across her face, washing away the night smoke. He walked to her side. You okay? She gave a small, tired laugh. I was supposed to die 2 years ago, Marcus. Every minute since has been borrowed time. I just never thought I'd still be fighting to pay it back. He looked at her, at the scars, the exhaustion, the unyielding fire that refused to fade. You're not paying it back, he said softly. You're proving it was worth something. She turned toward him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled, not out of defiance but peace. Outside, the sun broke through the tree line, golden and cold. And somewhere in that fragile light, they both knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. How far could you run before silence became your only weapon? The safe house still smelled like gunfire and pine resin when they left it behind. The sun was barely awake, golden light filtering through the trees like a memory that didn't belong to them anymore. Sarah drove this time, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on her lap, her eyes scanning the tree line with the alert stillness of a soldier who didn't believe in luck. Marcus sat beside her, scanning the GPS unit they'd stripped of trackers. The screen showed nothing but backroads and blank space. That was good. The less technology between them and the world, the better. Jake rode in the back, silent, rifle across his knees, his eyes heavy from 2 nights without real sleep. The road wound through forgotten farmland and mist-choked valleys. Every now and then, Sarah would check the rearview mirror, not to look at the road, but to measure how far behind her past still felt. Gas station in 5 miles, Marcus murmured, breaking the silence. After that, nothing for 50. Then we stock up and vanish, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it, Marcus heard the exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from running, but from surviving too long without rest. They pulled into a small-town fuel stop a few minutes later, one of those forgotten places where old flags still hung faded over cracked pumps. The place looked empty, but the bell over the station door chimed as Sarah stepped inside. Marcus stayed by the truck, scanning the horizon. Every sound, a bird, a passing breeze, felt like it carried weight. Inside, Sarah moved quietly through the aisles, collecting essentials. Bottled water, canned food, fuel stabilizer, a small first aid restock. The cashier, a man in his 60s with oil-stained hands, looked up as she approached. Road trip. She smiled faintly, something like that. He studied her face, his gaze sharp despite the kindness in it. You look like you've seen your share of roads. Too many, she said softly. He nodded, then rang up the items without another word. But before she could leave, he said something that lingered. Whatever's chasing you, he murmured, don't let it decide who you are. Sarah froze. Her heart skipped once, a single startled beat. For a moment she thought he knew. Then she realized he didn't. He was just someone who'd seen enough broken people to recognize one. Thank you, she said quietly. When she returned to the truck, Marcus glanced at her. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Some people see more than they should. He studied her profile, the hard lines of focus, the subtle tremor in her jaw when she blinked too slowly. "You've been carrying this for years, haven't you?" She gave a faint, distant smile. "You don't get to set it down, you just learn how to balance it." They drove again, heading east. By midday, the sky turned gray. Clouds gathered, heavy and low, the kind that promised rain and something heavier, memory maybe. Jake broke the silence first. "You really think D ceased the play? Federal contact means exposure. Brennan'll have friends there." Sarah's grip on the wheel tightened. "He already has friends there. The difference is, mine will listen." "Who is he?" Marcus asked quietly. She hesitated, then said, "Assistant Director James Halbrook, Internal Affairs. He's clean, or used to be. If anyone can reopen the investigation, it's him." "Used to be," Jake repeated. Her jaw tightened. "He was my mentor." That ended the conversation. They reached the border of Pennsylvania by late afternoon. Rain came down in sheets, pounding against the windshield. Sarah didn't slow down. The wipers fought to keep up, slicing through the downpour like clockwork. Marcus stared out the window, the rhythmic patter syncing with his heartbeat. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back?" he asked suddenly. Sarah didn't look at him. "Every day. And then I remember what they did, and I stop wondering." Her tone was quiet, not bitter, not angry, just final. Marcus nodded slowly. "You know, when I left the teams, I thought walking away meant peace. Turns out, it just means watching others fight battles you're no longer allowed to join." She glanced at him. "That's not peace, Marcus, that's guilt." He met her eyes. "Maybe it's both." The rain kept falling. The world outside blurred into a motionless haze. Jake adjusted his rifle case. "If you two are done getting philosophical, we've got company." Marcus turned. "Where?" Jake pointed toward the rearview mirror. Through the curtain of rain, a dark vehicle followed, black SUV, lights off, keeping just far enough back to look casual. Sarah didn't blink. "They found us." "How?" Marcus asked. "They didn't lose us," she said simply. "We just gave them enough time to get close." She accelerated, tires hissing against wet asphalt. The SUV followed. Jake unlatched the side window, scanning through binoculars. No plates, two up front, tinted rear. Marcus grabbed the map. "Nearest town's 15 minutes, too far." Sarah's eyes flicked across the road, assessing, calculating. "There's a tunnel ahead. One lane, 300 meters, perfect choke point." Jake frowned. "Perfect for who?" "For whoever uses it first." They reached the tunnel just as lightning split the horizon. Sarah slowed the vehicle, headlights cutting a narrow beam into the darkness ahead. The tunnel was old, concrete walls slick with moss, faint light flickering from inside. Marcus tensed. "You're not thinking." "I am," she said. She stopped just short of the entrance, killed the headlights, and pulled the emergency brake. The engine fell silent. Jake exhaled. "You want to ambush them in there." She looked over her shoulder, eyes steady. "I want them to think they've trapped us." Before they could argue, she was out of the truck, rain slicking her hair to her face. Marcus cursed under his breath and followed, his boots splashing through puddles. They moved quickly, one on each side of the tunnel mouth. The SUV slowed as it approached, its lights cutting through the downpour. Sarah raised her weapon, her pulse steady despite the chill running through her veins. She could almost feel the years folding back, muscle memory taking over. Marcus crouched behind a concrete pillar, his finger on the trigger. 2 minutes, maybe less. Jake's voice came through the comms from his position behind the truck. "You sure about this?" Sarah exhaled once, a slow, measured breath. "No, but it's what we've got." The SUV entered the tunnel. Its headlights illuminated the dripping walls, bouncing off the slick surfaces in fractured beams. Sarah waited until the front bumper cleared the midpoint, then stepped out. Now! The first flash was blinding, a stun grenade rolling across the concrete, detonating in a burst of white light. The SUV screeched to a halt, doors flying open. Gunfire followed sharp, echoing claustrophobic. Marcus fired twice, hitting the nearest assailant's leg. Jake's rifle cracked from behind, precise and deadly. Sarah advanced, firing in controlled bursts, each movement calculated, efficient, merciless. Within seconds it was over. 3 men down, one alive pinned behind the SUV door, his weapon trembling. Sarah walked forward, rainwater dripping from her sleeves, her expression carved from stone. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man's breath came in ragged gasps. Orders came from top, DC Ops. "Names." He shook his head. "You don't understand. Brennan doesn't answer to." A single shot cracked. The man fell, blood blooming dark against the wet pavement. Jake lowered his rifle, eyes hard. He was reaching for his gun. Sarah didn't argue. She just turned away, her voice flat. "Let's move before backup tracks their signal." Marcus followed, chest tight. Every step felt heavier than the last. As they pulled back onto the road, Sarah's reflection flickered in the windshield, eyes hollow, jaw clenched. Marcus wanted to say something, to remind her she was still human, that this wasn't her fault, but the words caught in his throat. She beat him to it. "You ever notice," she said quietly, "how silence becomes its own kind of noise?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "When you stop talking about what happened, when you stop fighting to be heard, it gets louder. Every night, every time you close your eyes." Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw not a warrior, not a fugitive, but someone haunted by her own survival. He said softly, "Maybe it's time you stopped being quiet, Sarah." She didn't answer, but the faint tremor in her breath was enough. The storm thinned by morning. They crossed into Maryland by dawn, the road glistening under pale sunlight. The world looked clean again, deceptively calm, as if nothing had burned the night before. But Sarah knew better. She could still hear Brennan's voice echoing in her head. "You're far too valuable alive." Marcus noticed the change in her posture, the subtle shift from caution to resolve. "You're thinking about him again." "I'm thinking about what comes next," she said. "If Halbrook doesn't believe me, then all of this was for nothing." "He will," Marcus said firmly. She glanced at him. "And if he does?" He didn't hesitate. "Then we make him." For the first time that morning, she smiled, faint but real. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" "Not when it comes to the right fight." She looked back at the horizon. The sun was climbing higher now, golden rays cutting through the mist. For a moment, the world almost looked peaceful again. Almost, because somewhere behind them, a line of black SUVs was already rolling east. And in one of them, Colonel Brennan watched the highway with calm precision, a small smile touching his lips. He spoke into his calm. "They're heading to DC. Send word ahead. Let's make sure their welcome is official." How do you tell the truth when the truth itself has teeth? The skyline of Washington, D.C. rose through a curtain of morning haze, glass and steel wrapped in early light, a city that looked peaceful only from far away. To Sarah, it felt like walking back into a war zone she'd once escaped. They parked 3 blocks from a government building tucked between reflective towers. It was Langley, not the Pentagon, but a nondescript gray structure with blacked-out windows and no signage. "Internal Affairs," she murmured, studying it through the windshield. "Still looks the same." Marcus adjusted the folded folder resting on his lap, a compact collection of flash drives, hard copies, and encrypted codes, the proof she'd risked everything to preserve. "You're sure Halbrook's still there?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "He's not just there, he's climbing, assistant director now, which means he either has the power to help or the reach to bury this deeper." Jake gave a low whistle, comforting. They got out quietly. Every step toward that building felt heavier than the last. The lobby was a study in sterile calm. Polished marble floors, armed guards, and bureaucratic stillness that smelled faintly of coffee and denial. The front desk officer looked up. "Can I help you?" Sarah met his gaze, her voice cool and even. "Tell Assistant Director Halbrook that Sarah Chen is here to see him." The man blinked, then frowned as if he hadn't heard right. "I'm sorry, who?" She repeated it, her tone sharper now. "Sarah Chen, he'll know the name." Marcus noticed the guard's fingers twitch toward his radio. Sarah caught it too. Her stance shifted subtly, just enough to remind everyone she wasn't defenseless. After a tense pause, the officer nodded and made a quiet call. Moments later, another man approached from the elevator, mid-40s, sharp suit, expression unreadable. "Sarah," he said, disbelief softening into something like shock. "Halbrook." Sarah's breath caught for just a second, not from emotion, but memory. "Hello, sir," she said quietly. He looked her over, his eyes scanning the faint scars, the hardened edge. "My God, you were declared dead." "Apparently not," she said. He motioned them into the elevator, jaw tight. "Let's not have this conversation in the lobby." His office was all glass and shadow, city lights flickering against a wall of muted screens. Halbrook poured 3 cups of coffee, though only he seemed steady enough to drink his. "When your name came across that desk again," he said slowly, "I thought it was a cruel joke. I saw the photos, the reports, the lies," Sarah finished. He hesitated. "If what you're saying is true." She interrupted again, sharper. "It is true. Brennan set me up. He used our mission to cover his weapons pipeline. And when I refused to falsify the intel, he had my unit ambushed and buried the evidence." She slid the folder across his desk. "That's everything. Contracts, signatures, off-book shipments from Kandahar to Prague. His fingerprints are on all of it." Halbrook didn't touch the folder immediately. He just stared at it, as though touching it meant crossing a line he couldn't return from. Marcus watched the man's face. He'd seen that look before, the moment when morality met self-preservation. Finally, Halbrook exhaled. "You understand what this means. If you're right, this isn't just Brennan. There are others, senators, contractors, entire chains of command." "Then you'll need to decide," Sarah said softly, "how deep you're willing to go." Silence filled the room. The rain outside had started again, faint against the glass like the world was listening. Halbrook finally picked up the folder and flipped through the pages. His eyes flicked over codes, photos, data logs. Then quietly he said, "Where did you get this?" Sarah's expression didn't change. "From the people Brennan didn't kill." Marcus saw her knuckles whiten slightly as she said it, ghosts she hadn't buried. Halbrook's jaw worked. He looked up at her. "You're asking me to go to war with my own government." "I'm asking you to remember why you joined it," she said. For a long time he said nothing. Then quietly, "Give me 48 hours." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That's too long." He shook his head. "You don't understand. If I go straight to justice with this, Brennan's network will see the request before it's filed. I need to verify the data myself securely." "Securely," Marcus repeated. "We barely survived the last secure place we were in." Halbrook gave him a weary look. "Dr. Thompson, I understand your concern." "You don't," Marcus said flatly. "You weren't in the crosshairs." The tension in the room thickened. Sarah raised a hand. "Enough. We don't have the luxury of trust issues." Halbrook nodded. "Agreed. But if I'm to act, I need confirmation. Meet me tomorrow night, same place as before." Sarah froze. "Before?" He gave a small smile. "The cafe near the reflecting pool. You used to swear their coffee could wake the dead." She didn't smile back. "And if you don't show, then you'll know I've been compromised." They left the building through the underground lot, tension following them like static. The air outside was cold. Sarah walked ahead, her footsteps echoing off concrete. Marcus caught up to her. You believe him. She didn't answer right away. I want to. Jake followed a few paces behind, scanning the shadows. Wanting to and needing to aren't the same thing. Sarah stopped beside the truck, her reflection fractured in the rain-streaked window. He's my last option, Jake. Last options get people killed, Jake muttered. She turned to him, eyes steady. So does doing nothing. Marcus opened the passenger door, but she didn't move. Her gaze was still fixed on the dark city skyline, distant, sharp, unwelcoming. He was like a father to me, she said softly. Taught me how to navigate the system, how to see the rot without letting it destroy me. But I also watched that same system turn him into part of it, if he's still clean. She trailed off. Marcus finished for her. Then maybe not everything was for nothing. She nodded once. Exactly. They spent the night in an abandoned motel near the Potomac. The place smelled of dust and rain-soaked plaster, but it was shelter. Sarah sat by the window, the faint city glow washing her face in silver light. Marcus joined her quietly. You haven't closed your eyes once. She gave a half-smile. Neither have you. He sat down beside her, the floor creaking under their weight. You ever wonder if some part of you stayed behind out there? In the field, she asked. In the silence, he said. That space between who you were and who you had to become. Her eyes flicked toward him, tired but alive. Every day, I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I think it means learning how to remember without breaking. He nodded slowly. Then maybe you're already healing. She looked out the window again. Or maybe I'm just good at pretending. A quiet beat passed between them. Then she whispered, almost to herself, I thought I'd forgotten how to trust, but somehow here you are. Marcus met her eyes. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, suspended. Before he could answer, Jake's voice cut through the quiet. Movement outside. They both turned instantly. Marcus grabbed the pistol from his pack. Sarah slipped to the side of the window, eyes scanning the lot. A car was parked 2 blocks down, engine off, lights out. Jake frowned. Same make as Brennan's convoy. Sarah's voice dropped. They found us faster than expected. Marcus checked his watch. It's been 4 hours since we left the building. She exhaled slowly. Halbrook's office is wired. They know everything. They moved fast. Within minutes, they were packed and on the road again, headlights off, cutting through back alleys toward the interstate. The streets of D.C. glistened under rain, reflecting traffic lights like ghost signals. Sarah's mind ran faster than the truck's engine. Every route, every turn rehearsed, calculated. But beneath it all was one truth she couldn't shake. She trusted Halbrook, and somehow they were already burned. Marcus, she said quietly, the evidence, we need backups. Already done, he said, pulling a small drive from his jacket. 2 encrypted copies, one hidden with me, one uploaded to an off-grid vault. Good, she murmured. Jake glanced in the mirror. We've got tails again, 2 cars. Sarah's grip tightened on the wheel. We're not running this time. Then what? Marcus asked. Her jaw clenched. We expose them before they can silence us. How? Live feed, she said. Open channel, encrypted broadcast. We get the files online, let the world see what Brennan's been hiding. Jake raised an eyebrow. You realize that paints a target on us the size of the Capitol. Sarah's gaze didn't waver, then let them aim. They reached the edge of the city by midnight, pulling into an industrial lot near the river, empty, quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. Sarah set up her laptop on the truck hood, rain dripping onto the metal. Marcus helped connect the external drives while Jake kept watch. The screen glowed pale blue. Lines of code streamed as she uploaded the files to an encrypted feed. Her hands shook once, not from fear, but from the weight of everything it meant. Once this is live, Marcus said softly, there's no going back. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce, certain. There's nothing left to go back to. The final file uploaded. The timer hit 0. Across the world, in government servers, newsrooms, dark web channels, the files went public. Brennan's deals, his signatures, his operations. Within seconds, the feed went dark. Sarah froze. They traced it. Jake cursed. EMP pulse, they're here. The roar of approaching engines filled the night. Sarah slammed the laptop shut. Move. Marcus grabbed the drives. Jake covered their flank as they bolted toward the narrow river path. Floodlights cut through the fog, sweeping across the lot. Gunfire erupted. Sparks danced off metal as rounds tore through the air. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her behind a concrete barrier. You hit. She shook her head, breath ragged. No, keep moving. Jake fired a suppressing burst, his voice raw. Go, I'll cover. Jake, Marcus shouted. But he was already gone, a blur of movement vanishing into the rain, drawing fire away from them. Sarah's heart clenched, but she didn't stop. She and Marcus broke for the riverbank, sliding down the mud toward the water. Behind them, explosions flashed, brief, blinding light against the black sky. They hit the water hard, the cold biting through every layer. As they swam for the far shore, sirens wailed in the distance, not from Brennan's men, but from the real world finally waking up. Marcus surfaced beside her, gasping, "He bought us time." Sarah didn't answer. She was staring back at the smoke, at the lights, at the ghost of a friend who just disappeared to protect them. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes silence costs too much. By dawn, they were miles from the city. The world felt heavier, but something had shifted. The files were out. The truth was no longer buried. Sarah sat on a hill overlooking the Potomac, soaked, shivering, but alive. Marcus sat beside her, quiet, letting the moment breathe. After a while, she said, "We did it." He nodded slowly, "At a price." Her gaze softened, grief hidden behind strength. All the right things cost something. He looked at her, the sunrise glinting off the water. "So what now?" She smiled faintly, weary but resolute. "Now we stop being ghosts." And as the first light of morning broke across the horizon, Sarah Chen, once erased, once silenced, sat in the cold dawn knowing she'd done what so many couldn't. She made the truth impossible to kill. What happens after you tell the truth and survive? For the first time in years, Sarah didn't have to hide, yet she'd never felt more hunted. The story broke before dawn. Every major outlet ran it. Files, images, testimony. Brennan's entire network was suddenly public knowledge. Satellite shipments, contractor deals, ghost accounts in government names. It spread faster than anyone could contain it. By the time the sun touched D.C. skyline, the Pentagon was in lockdown. Brennan's name trended worldwide. Colonel Richard Brennan. Weapons trafficking, black ops cover-ups, civilian deaths buried. But for Sarah, there was no celebration. She sat in a worn flannel blanket near an abandoned boathouse along the river, watching fog drift across the water. Her hair was still damp, her body trembling with exhaustion. Marcus approached quietly, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee from a camp stove. "Here," he said softly. She took it without looking at him. "Any word on Jake?" He hesitated, the kind of pause that said everything. "Nothing. The blast hit hard. No signals since." She stared into the coffee, her reflection rippling in the dark liquid. He knew he wouldn't make it. Marcus crouched beside her. "He made sure we did." Silence hung between them, heavy but not empty. The world was moving fast now, but for Sarah, time had slowed to a crawl. Every heartbeat echoed with the faces she'd lost, the unit in Kabul, the names erased from records, the friend who'd vanished into fire so she could live. And yet they had done it. Somewhere inside that ache, there was still something steady, not peace, not triumph, but a quiet kind of vindication. "You think it'll matter?" she asked. All those files, all that truth. Marcus sat down beside her. It already does. She gave a humorless smile. Brennan won't go quietly. No, Marcus agreed. Men like him never do, but now at least he has to crawl into the light. By midday, helicopters swept low over the Potomac. Marcus watched from the doorway as Sarah adjusted the bandages on her shoulder. The wound reopened slightly during their escape, but she ignored the pain with the same calm precision that unnerved him from day one. Feds are everywhere, he said. They're calling this the biggest domestic breach since the Snowden leaks. She tied the bandage tighter, and were the ones who gave them the rope. Halbrook's missing, Marcus added. Went off the grid an hour after the files went public. She looked up sharply, missing or silenced. No confirmation, he said quietly. Sarah sighed, closing her eyes briefly. He was either with us or ahead of us. Either way, he's gone. She stood, rolling her stiff shoulder. We can't stay here. They'll sweep the riverbanks next. Marcus frowned. You want to move again? You haven't slept in 2 days. She looked at him, weary but resolute. Sleep comes later, freedom first. He stepped closer, his voice softer now. You don't have to keep running. You did what you came here to do. She turned toward the open door, watching the water glint under sunlight. You think this is over because the world knows. Truth doesn't end a war, Marcus. It just changes what you're fighting for. They drove south, back roads, dirt trails, places maps forgot. The more the story spread, the tighter the net grew. Every checkpoint, every patrol meant one more reminder that even truth had a bounty now. By the second night, they reached an abandoned airstrip hidden between fields of overgrown grass. It was one of the many places Sarah had once used to move under radar back when she was still a ghost, not a fugitive turned whistleblower. Marcus shut off the headlights, the truck engine ticking softly in the cool air. He turned to her. You sure this is where you want to be? Sarah nodded. There's someone waiting. The hangar door creaked open, revealing a woman in a flight jacket, tall, confident, the kind of presence that carried old respect. Long time, the woman said. Sarah smiled faintly. Too long, Major. Wasn't sure you'd make it out of Kabul, the woman said. Then again, you always had a knack for proving ghosts wrong. Marcus glanced between them. Friend of yours. More like the last person who didn't turn me in, Sarah said. The woman, Major Elena Reyes, former Air Force intelligence, motioned them inside. You two stirred up the hornet's nest. Brennan's network's collapsing, but he's still out there. Half his men have flipped. The other half are hunting anyone tied to you. Sounds familiar, Sarah murmured. Reyes pulled up a screen showing encrypted news feeds. Here's the thing, you may have won the truth, but politically, you're a liability. The government can't publicly admit one of their own officers exposed this without shredding credibility, so they're spinning it. Marcus leaned closer. Spinning how? They're calling you an unauthorized leak, Reyes said, claiming the files were stolen by an ex-agent gone rogue. Sarah's jaw tightened. They're rewriting it already. Reyes nodded. And they'll keep rewriting it until the only thing left of you is a cautionary tale. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sarah said quietly, then we don't let them. Reyes arched an eyebrow. You've got something in mind. Sarah's gaze was distant, thoughtful, the same look she'd had when she planned the fake anaphylactic attack that saved her life. If they're going to call me a ghost, she said softly, then I'll show them what a ghost can do. That night, under the dim light of a maintenance lamp, Sarah sat on a crate with Marcus beside her. The hangar hummed faintly, with the sound of old engines and memories. You ever think about what comes next? Marcus asked. She gave a small, tired laugh. You mean after saving the world and being erased for it? Something like that. Her expression softened. I used to think the mission was everything. That duty meant giving up who you are for something bigger. but somewhere between surviving and being forgotten, I realized the only thing bigger than the mission is what it costs you. Marcus looked at her, really looked. The exhaustion, the calm, the strange peace beneath it all. You regret it? He asked. She shook her head. Number regret means you still wish things could have been different. I stopped wishing a long time ago. He studied her in the quiet. The flickering light made her scars look softer, her eyes brighter. Sarah, he said quietly, you don't have to disappear again. She smiled faintly. Maybe not, but the people I fought for still need someone out there who doesn't vanish when it gets hard. He leaned back, exhaling. You know, for someone who swore she was done being a soldier, you sound a lot like one. Maybe being a soldier isn't something you stop, she said. Maybe it's something that just changes shape. The quiet stretched between them again, not empty this time but full. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the hangar roof. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over her. It reminded her of every night she'd spent waiting for dawn, the noise of something ending and something else beginning. Marcus spoke softly, if they find us again. She opened her eyes, meeting his. Then they'll learn what it means when the quiet fights back. The next morning, Reyes returned with a message, an encrypted video, unsigned but unmistakable. Brennan. His face flickered on the small monitor, calm as ever, his tone almost conversational. Impressive work, Lieutenant. You've managed to burn down years of structure in one night. But make no mistake, the system you think you exposed was never mine alone. You just gave the world a taste of the chaos it was built to contain. Sarah's jaw clenched. Marcus felt her still beside him, fury radiating beneath the calm. Brennan smiled faintly. They'll call you a hero today, a criminal tomorrow, and when the world gets tired of your story, they'll forget you, just like before. The feed ended. Silence filled the hangar. Marcus turned to her. He's baiting you. She nodded slowly. I know. Then don't take it, he said. Her eyes hardened. You don't leave rot to grow back, Marcus. You burn it out. Reyes looked at her. Then what's the plan? Sarah's voice was calm, steady, the tone of someone who'd already accepted the cost. We finish what we started. Night again. They prepped quietly, reloaded weapons, checked communication links, packed intel copies. But beneath the tactical routine, there was something else moving, something deeper. A sense of finality. Marcus stopped her as she reached for her vest. You go after him, you might not come back. She looked at him, eyes soft, tired but certain. That's the thing about ghosts, coming back was never the point. He shook his head, voice breaking slightly. Sarah, you're not a ghost. You're the reason people still believe truth can win. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his arm. The first time she'd allowed herself the touch of comfort since all this began. Then promise me something, she said quietly. Anything. If this goes wrong, don't let them bury me again. Make sure the world remembers what was real. He swallowed hard. You'll tell them yourself. She smiled faintly, that quiet, impossible strength that defined her from the beginning. Maybe, she whispered, but just in case. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. It wasn't rain this time. It was the sound of something coming, the next fight, the next reckoning, the last silence before the storm. Sarah Chen picked up her weapon, slung it across her shoulder, and walked toward the open door. Marcus followed a step behind, the unspoken truth hanging between them like the breath before a final heartbeat. Some wars didn't end when the shooting stopped. Some wars began in the silence that followed. How do you face a ghost who wears your country's flag? Sarah stood at the edge of the airfield as dawn crept over the horizon, gray and cold. The air smelled of rain-soaked dirt and jet fuel. The world felt unnaturally still, like the calm before a verdict. Beside her, Marcus adjusted the strap of his medic bag. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Every movement between them now carried a kind of silent understanding, the bond of people who had already lost everything they could afford to lose. Ray's approached, headset in hand. We traced Brennan's signal, abandoned facility 30 miles south of Quantico, old decommissioned command post, no guards on the perimeter, which means he's waiting. Sarah nodded. He wants me to come. Of course he does, Ray said. Predators never leave the cage open by mistake. Marcus glanced at Sarah. You don't have to go in there. Her eyes met his calm, unwavering. Yes, I do. He shook his head. You already won, the truth's out, he's finished. Sarah's voice softened, but there was steel underneath. Men like Brennan don't die from exposure. They die when someone finally stands close enough to remind them what honor looks like. Ray sighed. Then at least don't go alone. I won't, Sarah said, looking at Marcus. He's coming. Marcus blinked. I am. A faint smile touched her lips. You said you were done watching other people fight battles you couldn't join. He stared at her for a moment, then exhaled slowly. Guess I did. The drive south was quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty, just full of things too heavy to say. Rain came down in thin streaks, tapping against the windshield. The wipers kept rhythm with the heartbeat of the road. Brennan's compound emerged through the mist, a low sprawl of concrete and rust, overgrown with weeds and memory. A place where orders had once been given that never made it into official records. Sarah parked 100 yards out. Marcus checked his weapon. You sure he's alone? She opened the door, stepping into the wet morning. Brennan was never alone, but he'll want to be this time. They moved silently across the open ground, boots sinking into mud. The door to the compound hung slightly ajar, a whisper of steel against concrete. Inside, the air was stale. Dust hung like fog. Faded maps lined the walls, their corners curling. A single light flickered deeper within, throwing long shadows across the floor. Sarah moved first. Marcus followed, watching every corner, every doorway. Then they saw him. Colonel Richard Brennan sat behind a steel desk, calm as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this exact moment. His uniform was gone, replaced by a gray shirt and slacks, but the arrogance, the authority, remained like a scar that never healed. Lieutenant Chen, he said smoothly, leaning back in his chair, or do I call you the martyr now? Sarah didn't answer. She stopped 5 paces from him, rainwater dripping from her jacket. You wanted this face to face, she said. Here it is. He smiled faintly. And what now? You shoot me. Make me another ghost for your story. She studied him quietly. You think this is about revenge? He shrugged. Everything's about revenge, especially for people like us. You think you're better because you hid yours behind ideals. Marcus stepped forward, anger breaking through his calm. You betrayed your own soldiers for profit. You call that an ideal? Brennan didn't look at him. His gaze stayed on Sarah. You see, still hiding behind men to fight your battles, some things never change. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she didn't react. You know what the real difference between us is, Brennan continued. You expose corruption and call it justice. I manipulate it and call it control. But in the end, both of us do it for the same reason, because chaos terrifies us. She took another step forward, eyes locked on him. You killed people who trusted you. I kept the world turning, he said. You think governments survive on ethics. They survive on secrets. Sarah's voice dropped, quiet and dangerous. Then you've mistaken fear for order. He smiled, that familiar cold smile. And you've mistaken noise for truth. You released those files thinking the world would care. They'll consume your story for a week, and by next month they'll have moved on. You'll still be the dead soldier who screamed into the void. Sarah's hand flexed slightly, not toward her weapon, but toward the small drive in her pocket. You're wrong, she said. They won't forget this time. Brennan tilted his head. Because of you. Because of him, she said softly, glancing at Marcus. And because of everyone who didn't live long enough to speak. Something shifted in Brennan's expression, a flicker of recognition. You always did believe in ghosts, he said. Sarah stepped closer, her voice a whisper. No, I believe in what they leave behind. The tension in the room tightened like wire. Brennan's eyes darted toward the desk, just enough for Marcus to notice the weapon half hidden beneath a stack of papers. Sarah, Marcus shouted. The gun came up fast, but Sarah was faster. Her shot rang out once, echoing through the hollow building. Brennan's weapon clattered to the floor. He staggered back, shock flashing across his face. The bullet hadn't hit his heart, it had gone clean through his shoulder. Sarah lowered her gun. I'm done killing men who already lost, she said quietly. Brennan stared at her, pale, trembling, fury bleeding into fear. You think this makes you noble? No, she said, it makes me finished. She turned away. Marcus picked up Brennan's weapon, unloaded it, and set it on the desk beside him. You'll get your trial, he said coldly. For once in your life, you don't get to write the ending. Brennan's voice followed them as they walked toward the exit. You think they'll let you live after this? You think your country forgives whistleblowers? You'll vanish, both of you, swallowed by the same machine you tried to expose. Sarah didn't stop walking. Her voice floated back through the dim light, calm and final. Then at least it'll choke on the truth. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world felt lighter, not cleansed, not redeemed, just real. Marcus followed her to the edge of the compound, the mud sucking at their boots. You could have killed him. I almost did, she said softly. But he wanted that. He wanted me to end up like him, empty, righteous, alone. Marcus looked at her, the morning light catching in her eyes. So what now? She smiled faintly. Now we make the silence mean something. They reached the truck. Reyes was waiting by the door, radio in hand. Federal teams are moving in, she said. You did it. Sarah nodded. No, we did it. Reyes handed her a folded envelope. Anonymous drop came through the secure line. GPS coordinates, no name. Looked like Jake's encryption. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a single message. Not dead, keep moving, stay off-grid. J. She exhaled, part disbelief, part relief so raw it hurt. Marcus grinned. He's alive. Yeah, she whispered. Of course he is. Ghosts don't die easy. Reyes smiled faintly. Neither do legends. Sarah looked toward the horizon, the first real sunlight breaking through the clouds, scattering across the wet ground like fragments of something holy. She turned to Marcus. You ever wonder if maybe survival isn't the victory, maybe it's the responsibility? He nodded slowly. Then you've got a lot left to carry. She smiled, small, steady, the kind of smile that came from scars, not miracles. Then let's carry it quietly. Weeks later, headlines faded. The world moved on. Brennan stood trial, his name stripped from walls that once carried his command. Officials distanced themselves. Justice twisted through the same machine that had buried Sarah once before. But beneath the noise, something lingered, her name, whispered in circles that believed in honor over obedience. Sarah Chen, the soldier who wouldn't stay dead. Marcus visited her months later, deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She lived in a cabin now, small, quiet, surrounded by pines that didn't ask questions. He found her sitting on the porch, oiling an old rifle not for war, but as ritual. You still keeping score? He asked gently. She looked up, smiling faintly. Only with myself. He handed her a folded newspaper, a headline about reform hearings, military oversight, accountability acts in progress. It's working, he said. You changed something. She glanced at the paper, then set it aside. Maybe, or maybe I just reminded them someone, always watching. He sat beside her. The forest hummed quietly around them, leaves rustling, birds calling, the sound of life going on. After a long silence, she said softly, "You ever wonder if some wars were never meant to be won, just survived?" Marcus nodded. "I think surviving is winning." She smiled again, tired, peaceful. "Maybe you're right." They sat there for a long while, saying nothing. The light faded to gold. The world, for once, didn't feel like an enemy. And when the last sunlight touched her face, Sarah Chen, soldier, ghost, survivor, finally let herself breathe. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar. Sometimes courage doesn't shout. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.